On to our next panel, ladies and gentlemen, which is titled Innovative Models of Arts Education. We have with us Director, Science Gallery Bengaluru, Jahnavi Palke, Managing Trustee, Nrityagram, Lynn Fernandez, Dean, Contemporary Arts and Curatorial Practice, Shrishti Institute of Art, Design and Technology, Meena Vari, Founder Director, Art First Foundation, Ritu Khoda, Music Educationist and Co-Founder, Artlinks Learning, Bengaluru, and Symposium Co-Convener, Sadhna Rao. And our moderator will be SVP SR Group, CEO Avid Learning, Curator Royal Opera House, Mumbai, and Symposium Co-Convener, Asad Lalji. For more about each of them, please refer to the bio handout provided. Welcome to all our panelists, and over to you, Asad.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our session titled Innovative Models of Art Education. I'm actually very excited to be here. I have 5 rock star panelists who are doing some amazing work in the space. So I have to just basically sit here and keep quiet and may let the magic happen again. But that said, I did do a little research. Bear with me for a few minutes while I just do some of the opening remarks. This topic on arts education was a key focus in the symposiums that FICCI and Avid had in Mumbai and in Delhi. And further, like a few months ago, we had also focused on this at the Arts Orchestrators Conference that we had hosted. And I'm sure the insights that we gain from today's discussion also will be very influential and important to take the conversation forward. And we at FICCI and Avid are working continuously. In fact, there's another conference we planned for next month to take this education and the alternate arts education space further. But now we turn to the IT and startup capital of our country, Bengaluru. And I loved what Mr. Ravichandran has said, and hopefully it will become the world design capital. And I love the fact that it was already said that Bangalore gets it, and it's got a DNA of giving back. But that said, it is India's 3rd largest city behind Delhi and Mumbai, and it's a progressive IT hub, which has resulted in a fast developing creative ecosystem and a community. What I find very interesting is this figure is that Bangalore is also becoming the education hub with 893 colleges, and it's the maximum number in any city in the country. And this is per the All India Survey of Higher Education, which is compiled by the Union Ministry of Human Resources Development in 1718. Also selected on this by the central government to be chosen under the Smart Cities mission in June of 17. Again, a lot of what has been said in the earlier panels on smart cities and the objectives. But what I'd like to say the objective of and the mission of developing, besides core infrastructure, a key aspect of the project is developing smart education systems and infrastructure. And that's what this panel is going to be talking about. There are some best practices, some key learnings to be learned from, in Mangalore, I believe they're partnering with Cardiff University in Wales for this Livable Urbanism Mangalore project. And I'm sure that there'll be some learnings from there to see how cities can collaborate with educational institutes in this development of these smart cities initiatives. But that said, again, Sanjoy in his opening remarks had given a lot of statistics, but there's lots of research of how much other countries are spending and how much we're not. But, the point being that 72% of global leaders, when they are interviewed, say that what they're looking for people is creativity. And these are some new, just say they're not new findings, but they're new reports that came to us, which said that the Creative Industries Federation in the UK, for example, has pointed out studying creative subjects positively impacts young people's well-being, their development, and their future opportunities. And like that, there are several research papers that we can cite, but the panel here, I think, has been doing some amazing work in moving this agenda forward. And just the last bit of my opening remarks, which is actually some figures pertaining to India, is that less than 3% of the country's GDP is spent on education, sports, arts, and culture. That's less than 3%, which is quite low, to be very honest. In the past 65 years, the higher education system in India has grown 300 times to 30 million students over 37,000 colleges. And only the reality is many of our graduating population is not equipped to join the workforce because of that. Optimistically, in the 2019 budget, 94,000 crores, that is 3.3% of the budget, which is about 10,000 crores more than the last year, has been allocated to the educational sector, which is quite encouraging. But the question is how much of it will actually go to education with relevance to the arts, and more specifically in innovative and alternate methods of arts education, and how does it get integrated into the mainstream, which is going to be a big part of our conversation today. Our panelists have all been doing amazing work, and what I'm going to do is just ask them each to kind of, with a question, to ask them each to share their journey, some of the trends, some of the pain points, where they see it going, and I'm sure we're going to have a wonderful discussion, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So I'm going to start with Ritu. Hi, Ritu. Ritu, your organization Art First aims to leverage arts in order to develop imagination, visual literacy, creative skills, cultural awareness among students and educators alike. So if you can take us through, how can it be employed and developed, make students critical thinkers and make them more problem solvers for future employment to start with?
Quickly, just to tell you what we do at Art First, our focus has been to see how can we inculcate a culture of thinking at school level. And if you look at it, the core of it is the child. And as they grow and as they unfurl, the impact of that is what you see in the society around us. We looked at visual arts because that's what I'm really passionate about, and I have kind of grown with a lot of visual arts in my home and my surrounding. But when I saw the progression of that in schools, I realized that my son, who was just 3, and there's a 30-year difference between us, he did exactly the same things that I did when I was a kid. So that led me to question as to a subject which is such a deep learning subject, which really impacts your cognitive thinking. Why is it relegated to the background? It's highly marginalized in our school systems. We're very happy to make it a hobby class, but we do not look at it as a core subject. And that is where the crux of the problem lies, and which is what our work is. Will it lead to employability? Will it kind of generate jobs? I really can't kind of predict. But will it make them great thinkers? Yes. Will they be able to dig deep into their own processes and be able to come up with innovative solutions? Yes, provided we are able to continuously kind of give them that platform that celebrates independent and original thinking. So I think our work is very much focused in that area. What we've done is we've looked at right from preschool till class 8th and also gone on till class 12th. But we pegged it keeping in mind the journey of a child. So what is the mental construct of the child, or what is the psychological well-being of the child, or what are the kind of learnings that take place as the kid goes from kindergarten right till class 12th, and that's how we pegged our curriculum. So what we've done is we've created a full-fledged art education program. We've looked at creating books that focus on the curriculum. So I think that for the first time, they're textbooks, but which are very, very interesting books, and the production is such that it kind of completely sucks you into that, is happened for the first time only for the reason, and which is where the challenges are, that our teachers are very skill-based. And our teachers do not know how to kind of get the child to start thinking, especially in the field of visual arts. So these books actually help you kind of dig deep into it through stories, also through art appreciation. So we have works of renowned, just not renowned, but artists who are relevant to the child, and that's what we kind of focus on. And all of that goes into the critical development of the way they are looking at a work of art. And in kindergarten, it's a lot about accidental learning. So while doing something is what they discover. So, something like colors, and they'll come up and start talking about how the beauty of colors. But if you look at elementary school, it's a lot about observations. And when you go further is when your critical thinking start to take
Sure.
place.
And you're going to be launching the latest of your publications later in this afternoon.
Yes.
But could you tell us a little bit about, how you engage with children and parents outside the school system? Because I think that's also a very important part of the learning.
Yes, it is, but it's also a gap we're trying to address. Unfortunately, when we go outside of school systems and we look at art, it's treated as a hobby class. Okay, so it's like we have an art teacher and we have a hobby class and it's extracurricular. I'm unable to create the respect that the subject deserves. And how do I do that? Even for parents, it's not so much about how your child is thinking, but oh, what a beautiful piece of art. And oh, this looks really pretty. Why is my child not doing neat work? And so we are addressed with a whole lot of such questions. And I think I rather deal with PTA and schools at a larger scale to be able to educate them. But when I start, and when I do workshops, for me, it's a long-term engagement. So like what we floated for teenagers, it was called Partner a Master. It's an artist mentor program. And over there, you have children who are engaging with different artists, but on a long-term basis, like for a year. And so that's where the transformation takes place. So unfortunately, we still have not been able to. And I don't think so I'll ever go and do a workshop model, but I would definitely be doing it at school level and engaging with parents there instead.
Wonderful. We're going to come back to that. And I'm going to talk. Lynn, Nityagam, obviously, you've said a little bit about it earlier, but is India's first modern Gurukul system. And so how has Nityagam successfully employed the Gurukul style of teaching, and how has this learning style been adapted, and fit in contemporary times?
One of the greatest gifts Protima gave us was the ability to turn around and say, this doesn't work, I'm going to go the opposite direction and try it the other way. Which was a very, very freeing thing for us when we started out, because she left, Protima died very quickly after Nityagam began. And this gift of being able to adapt, to change, to go with the flow, really stood us instead. So with the classical arts, with classical dance, for instance, the traditional model of teaching is, I've learned Kathak and it's really horribly boring. And if I had to learn like that, I would run away within a couple of years. So what we had the freedom to do was to adapt and take from anyone who was working successfully around us, to take from them and use it within the system. So we do follow the Guru Shishya Parampara. We do have students in our residential program who live with the gurus, with the teachers. They function within the Gurukul system. However, we also have, for instance, in our program for the younger children, we've worked with a group called the National Dance Institute in New York, which was started by a ballet dancer, to take movement to inner city schools and to kids who don't have access to dance. And they have the most incredible method of teaching dance, which is just fun. There are no rules around it. It's fun. It's there's a lot of trust. There's a lot of safety for the kids, but it's also fun. And there's no learning curve. I mean, it's just straight up. It's quite incredible. So what we did was we got someone from there who came and trained our dancers, and the dancers were given the task of adapting it to teaching Odissi dance. It's a fantastic model. We have like several hundred young kids who have trained in that program, out of which right now we have a group of 12, which is huge in classical dance, who are now 13 and 14 years old. They started when they were with us when they were 5, who might be our next generation of our ensemble, and perhaps a few future stars in there. And that's an incredible achievement, using a program which is just out of the blue from somewhere else.
But you've adapted it.
We've adapted it to
a lot
our
of experimentation,
dance.
and do you share these best practices within your community across India, the dance community, or is it?
What we're trying to do, what we have not done that yet, what we are trying to do is to try and set up a system of where we can get people to come and live with us. Nithiram, one of the great things we have is space. We have 10 acres. We have an artist residency there where people can come and live and work there independently or with us. So the plan is to be able to pass this on to other things. We right now use it for our own kids. We use it in schools where we go and teach. We teach in a lot of schools around in rural Karnataka, but we also do stuff in schools here. And yes, the aim is to be able to pass on that information.
But it must be very interesting to see how the progression from when you started to where you are. Now, obviously, the environment is changing. The consumption of art and the way art is produced is changing. So how are you all adapting to this? Because you said flexibility and fluidity, for lack of better words, was your collaborations. And I just believe, that you're stronger with the right partners. And, the Science Gallery Bangalore has tied up with 3 of the leading institutions, the Indian Institute of Science, the National Center of Biological Science, and the wonderful Shrishti Institute of Art, Design, and Technology, all of it which offer complementary areas of expertise. Can you tell us a little bit about, I know we met briefly a few months ago, about this unique collaboration and the education programs that you're planning to kind of roll out?
Sure. So quickly to introduce the Science Gallery project. Can you hear me at the back? Yes. Yeah, okay, excellent. So we are a part, first and foremost, of an international network of galleries that are university-based, that started out about 11 years ago in Dublin, at Trinity College Dublin. About 5 years into their existence, they were considered a success by all sorts of measures, and they received some funding to take the idea global. And as of today, we are 7 galleries in the world. So it's Trinity College Dublin, King's College London, University of Melbourne, Michigan State University Detroit, Ca' Foscari University Venice, Erasmus University Rotterdam, and ourselves. Now, so the university link, or the fact that we are deeply embedded into research, pedagogy, and outreach for universities at the interface of art and science, is quite strong for us. It's the thing that makes us most meaningful. Now, as most in this room will recognize and realize and probably have a good laugh with me, in India we have to do things differently. And so, we are not based on a university campus. In fact, we are the only independent gallery in the network with not 1, but 3 partners. And I'll give you a couple of very quick pointers as to why that is the case. One of them is that we hardly have universities in India where one can go and do everything from medicine to architecture to art, right? We work in silos. All our institutes of excellence are working in silos. And that is a huge, huge problem, right? And that meant that the gallery could not be located on a single campus. And in fact, we have to look for partnerships that brought different aspects to the gallery, and we are still quite incomplete. And that might explain my appointment, because I'm a historian of science by training, and we don't have a single humanities or social sciences university that's collaborating with us at the moment, right? So that's the nature of the gallery in Bangalore. Now, that said, of course, we are working with what we have, and what we have is excellent raw material to start with. The tagline that the network uses is that we are a space where art and science collide. Personally, I have found that slightly limiting, and so the motto that we are using for Bangalore is science, culture, experiment. So in a sense, expanding art to include a much broader remit than art or the practice of art alone, and science, and the word experiment, which is far more inviting, I think, than the word collision, for example. Because it is about, okay, come experiment with the sciences, with the art, with the collaboration, and let's see where this experiment can therefore take us. So I think what we are mandated with, and what the challenge in front of us is to create a public institution which provides research-based engagement, right? So which remains which has fidelity to the mandate, and what we are helped in with this, and the word public institution is critical here, because that's where we have a huge how should I say, a gap, a gaping hole that needs to be filled. And therefore, what we have is the government of Karnataka, in fact, supporting us, right? And therefore, we have that commitment of longevity, of funding, of existence, in order to be able to craft something that goes beyond having to think about, okay, is this going to provide something useful, right? And that's something, I mean, on this panel, but also in, Ravi was speaking on the previous panel, for example. I think usefulness is a tricky word, and I'm reminded of a wonderful piece that Abraham Flexner, the founder of the Institute for Advanced Studies at Princeton, at the end of the Second World War, wrote a lovely piece about the usefulness of useless knowledge. Was the piece he wrote when he founded what is today the world's sort of premier thinking institution, deeply embedded in the university context, etc. So anyway, so that broadly speaking is our mandate, a public institution where we bring scientists, artists, engineers, and scholars from the natural and human sciences. So the human and the natural sciences both are equally important for us, to do things together, right? So not just speak to each other, but to do things together. So when the gallery, which is now under construction, so I'm wearing my wonderful hat as a real estate developer as well. When we are there, so to speak, we will have public engagement spaces that are the equivalent of also experimental spaces. So we have a wet lab, a food lab, a theory lab, a new media lab, a black box theater, and I might be forgetting something. But we also have 6 experimental spaces where we can have these groups come and work together. So one of the decisions we took in Bangalore, given that we were allowed to kind of, deliver the same mandate differently, was to say that, okay, we are not a gallery that showcases outcomes of collaboration, but we are a space that delivers collaboration. And so that's the idea we wish to take forward with this institution.
And considering this whole approach is quite novel to India, and I believe you all are the first Asian member to open this, is how are you planning to target, to attract the younger audience? I mean, I think they'd come running if they knew what they were going to get, but how would you, is there some focused plan on how to approach these younger audiences and build these stakeholders? Because, in Bombay it's not anywhere close. We have the Nehru Science Center, which is a wonderful resource. I mean, if you go there, it's such a badly kept secret, people don't go there. I mean, I go with my kid wherever I go in the world to these science museums because I have more fun than she does, because there's so much learning and actually learning and using your hands and learning together. Like there's one in Arizona, which is fantastic. But so how are you planning to get these young and the restless in there?
So as a part of our advisory bodies, so we have several of those. We have the academic advisory body, then we have the sort of research and outreach advisory body. We call them the Leonardos. No need to guess why they're calling them Leonardos. But we also have a group of young leaders drawn from the age group of 15 to 25, which is our target age group. And we sort of expect them to become our, feed us. At my age, I don't know what it means any longer to be a 15-year-old, and I have no desire to be a 15-year-old. So how do you then get input as to how they're thinking, right? So we have a group of young leaders. That's the first thing so both for input into what we should like to see here. So my colleagues at Science Gallery London, for example, organized one season. So we have seasons which are basically sort of built around exhibitions, but they're not only exhibitions, they're learning programs, etc. And we have our first one coming up in December 15 to January 31, in fact, at Bangalore International Center, until our building comes up. So we have these, so coming back to Science Gallery London, the young leaders wanted to see something on addiction. And therefore then a season called Hooked was created. So we have the young leaders, we also have mediators. So our exhibition spaces or our learning programs are not experienced alone by a visitor unless you decide to. What we have in that space are people who are young people, again drawn from the target age group, who don't explain anything, but who are provocateurs in a way, right? Like, so they initiate a conversation with you, and they walk with you, and they, so I think, in my mind, actually, students of drama probably are best suited to this, but we still have to build on this. I mean, it's going to take us some time. And we also have training programs for them. So that's the second sort of more formalized part of how do we get these people. But also, given the inequities, the diversity, the highly variegated nature of this demographic in India currently, which is, of course, a dominant demographic, we are also we are working with the Bangalore Metro and Rail Corporation to use metro station spaces. So they have promised to give us dedicated spaces, not just us, but there are 7 organizations working together on this, where we will have programs to speak to young people from the catchment area of the metro station, where they go to government schools, government colleges, government institutions, or probably even in informal learning, like night schools and, etc. And we'll have engagement programs.
And what sort of this it's collaboration again? So are they 7 disparate groups, or are they all within academia?
So some of us are working together. It's just too tentative to declare those names, and so I'm being a little bit careful.
We're all friends.
Nothing is not recorded. No, but it's definitely, how should I put it? It's on the anvil. It's being worked out. We've had several meetings, and we hope to set this sail by summer next year.
Wonderful. You have a plan to get them all hooked.
Yes.
I'm going to just turn to Meena right now. And, Srishti is considered one of the best design schools in the country and also one of the most well-known formal education institutes in Bangalore. So how has Srishti developed a distinctive multidimensional approach towards education? And, again, tell us about your trials and tribulations and also some of the trends that you see.
Thank you very much. I've been in Srishti since 2002. And I must say that 2002 was a time when we were taking in only 30 students, and today we have 350 students coming only at the foundation level. And what's happened is not because we wanted to grow, it is because the need came from the ground, and things started getting added to the programs that were being developed. So when it was only graphic design at one point or furniture design, then the furniture design has now gone into, from product design, it has gone into gaming, into technology. And while we are sitting here in the forum, which is put up by FICCI, we are also talking about the industry 4.0. We're talking about technology, which is going from tweeting to Twitter.bot and Twitter bots. So this is like a kind of a generation we are seeing, which, like Janvi said, I don't know what a 17-year-old comes in and what kind of aspirations that these individuals bring in, or the aspirations that they want to go out and connect with. And so for Srishti, the challenge always have been that how do you think about a future that we are all talking about now when we are talking about a climatic collapse. Well, what are we giving it back to them? Are we preparing them how to adapt? So I know there are a lot of creative people who are thinking about an adapting mode, which might have started 10 years ago. I know I'm going to switch between so many things, because what Janvi is talking about, this whole thing of art, science collide, we started talking about in 2003. And 2004, we had the first New Media Art Festival. We started a Experimental Media Lab, Center for Experimental Media Lab in 2007, because we had people coming and talking to us that we want to work with science, not as scientists, but as artists. So we had to get prepared for that. We had the first collaboration with NCBS, thinking about an artist and scientists sitting together in a hall, talking about this in 2007. So for us, it was very exciting when we heard about Science Gallery coming to in Bangalore. And we had to jump in and we had to put our stake in. So Janvi, I must tell you, we have a School of New Humanities. So you should come and talk to us also about your humanities part. So, so for Srishti, that is where we've been, like experimentation, innovation, these were words we were using then. And now, when you're talking about innovating, I realize innovation is not any longer a big word. How do you define innovation? That's the big thing for us. So for us, it is how do we create that confidence, a creative confidence in an individual where we want minds that the mindset, which is not looking at a fixed thing, but which is wanting to grow. So the challenge always has been in Srishti is the programming. How do we program our courses for the next individual, the next future generation, you know? And the people who worked with us or studied with us in 2009 come out and say, oh, we don't know what's happening in Srishti now. So we have to keep ourselves keep moving on. So that's what we've been. And there was something else which I forget
but
now.
you know, it's very interesting. I mean, when I went to college, I had arts, commerce, and science. Those were my three choices, and you had to choose them. And as a guy, if you chose arts, which I did, was also looked down upon. Why are you doing this? And you know, I was talking to a bunch of young kids the other day, and I said, you know, you all are so lucky because you all just have so many opportunities, and you'll are so unlucky because you'll have so many opportunities and you're confused. And you know, the whole thing is we don't know what the job market is going to look like in 10 years from now. Everything's changing, and you all are in the technology capital of India, and you know, one of the most important cities to make this change. So I've always wondered, I mean, I'm heard what Janvi had to say and what you had to say is looking at, you know, I probably think I want to program something around this for Avid because, you know, what would be like, you know, maybe it's a design thinking workshop on what is the future of education and, you know, a day in the life of a student in 2060, for lack of a better word.
So, yeah, I was part of this Design for Change. I went for the conference which just happened last week, and it was the industry sitting there. And one of the things that we are looking out, like Srishti doesn't believe in placements. We don't do placements, but we want the industry to be always part of us. Because if you look at a city, what does the city need? The city, like when you're talking about an art city, you need that community engagement, and that community engagement comes when you prepare the individuals to go out, understand the city, create that inclusivity that you're talking about, create that compassionateness with the communities that is around you, and create for a future, and a future which is very unknown to all of us. And the industry, like everybody is saying, the industry is the one which is deciding what they want as job seekers. Like they are the ones who are creating the job market. And the market as such, we don't like the word even in art market, job market. You know, market is not a, that's why I use the word aspiration. The aspiration is with the parents like you and the student who is going out. There is a tendency where people will like to do that visual communication course. We have a huge number of students who want to do that because they know at the end of it we will get that thing. But we want that 4 or 5 people who will create that change. And that's what we are looking at.
It probably could be that, you know, rather than have the job, they'll create a job that they want to do. I think that's going to be the next trend with all the technology and all the collaboration and all the different learnings that people have.
Yeah, but that's one of the things that Srishti always hears, that you'd never create people for us. They are the ones who are creating jobs for themselves.
I'm going to turn to Sadhna. Through studies at Northwestern University's Auditory Neuroscience Lab, the Boston Children's Hospital, the University of Toronto, and many other researchers have studied and actually documented that tactile evidence that music training, learning to play an instrument at an early age or sing, has, you know, a wonderful impact on children as they grow. So do you want to share some thoughts on ArtLinks, the wonderful work that you do, and also about this whole thing that we talked about earlier, about assimilating the curriculum into the mainstreams?
Okay, I must say that while the earlier panelists said that Chennai is conservative, ArtLinks saw its birth in Chennai. It was born and incubated in Chennai. So the ecosystem felt the need for a structured music education system based on the arts. So I have deep resonances with all what the panelists said. And so it was the ecosystem that demanded it. It took, for ArtLinks, 2 years prep time before we could even enter the school domain. So the first area was pedagogy. We tied up with, the need of the ecosystem was, we don't want to, music was really taught in a Pata class. Part means song, a song class. We do not want that. We want a holistic whole. So to define that holistic whole, we went to 2 conservatories. One based out of Chennai called Brihadvani, run by a 9th generation Veena player who went to study ethnomusicology at Wesleyan University. And with about 20 to 30 years of work experience in the field. We also tied up with Kinder Music, which is based out of Canada in 70 countries. So the first question was to establish pedagogy and its adaptability. So when music was considered an art and it is one-to-one, We are taking it now to one-to-many. So the underlying principle was, will brilliance come down? We decided we're not addressing that right now. It is the spread. So the first thing was establishing pedagogy with both the conservatories to get both the conservatories to dialogue, and a whole host of teachers came in. The second part came to, actually nobody really in India, I'm saying, nobody really learns music to be a music teacher. They do music to be a performer. So what happened is, hours of training, am I losing my voice? These were the issues that came in. We were the largest recruiters for Kalakshetra, but we realized that not from the colleges could we hire our teachers. It was people who were within their 30, 31 years of age, who've gone through the performance circuit, who have understood the vagaries and were looking to continue their role as performers, as well as now wanted to have stability of income. So we had to put them through 6 months of training in the pedagogy. That was one. They had the craft, they had the art. But, however, they had to be taught how to be indoctrinated in the school system. So that is as far as pedagogy is concerned. How did we make the economics work? We decided we are not opening an institution. We tied up with schools in Chennai. The sample was about 10 schools. We used their premises. My vote goes that it should be part of curricula. We couldn't win that battle everywhere. We were also part of extracurricular. So we had 1 class a week for the global music and 1 class a week for the Indian classical tradition. And as Ritu said, it was divided according to kindergarten, class 1 to 3, 3 to 7, and 7 onwards, then we directed them to the conservatory if they wanted to continue in music. Very quickly, the success in the school system came because of the relevance in one of Chennai's flagship schools. In class 1, the curriculum that CBSE had done in maths had changed. So there was a learning gap between the teachers and the students, and almost 25 to 30 students were being detained in grade 1 and not being allowed to go to grade 2. We were part of the PTA, and the very reason that they are failing in maths, after 24 classes, Artlinks would give a comprehensive summary of the student. For the very reasons that they are failing in the maths class, they are excelling in the music class. So they're saying they do not know sequencing, they know perfect sequencing. The most complex of mathematical patterns in music and rhythm and melody, they are getting it, and they're not getting it in the new curriculum. So for us, that became the best case study, and that's how Artlinks got its curriculum sanction. So that is stage 1. Stage 2 is to get in the parent. So when you're going with a curriculum like music education, you actually have 3 customers. You have the school board. I'm sure Ritu will agree. You have the customer is the parent who signs the check for the class. And the third, the client is your child at the student level. So the client level, we had no problem. So again, a case study happened in, again, one of Chennai's flagship schools. There was this young boy, all of 8 years old, who was a regular bunker to school, but for the days of music class, he would make sure he's there. Parents happened to be very high-profile industrialists in Chennai and were extremely upset with the fact that the child does not sing, can't carry a tune, doesn't know a notation, but wants to go for music class. So actually the complaint came to us because he was a huge donor. Again, we had an MIS system which tracked the child's progress in class. Very true, he can't hold a tune, he can't sing. But, so in the kinder music section, it was completely based on technology. We had the most fantastic tracks, age appropriately put. This boy had a talent. He would be the teacher's assistant. In both the classes, he would master the technology. He would turn on the Shruti boxes. So at the age of his class, boys and girls' voice is not broken, right? So the pitch is the same. So he knows who is singing in G flat, who is singing in C. He knows the scale. And he would organize, that was his talent. And he would organize the students according to the pitch on the Shruti box. He would be a master conductor. So when we met his parents, the first thing, I think it was a case of ignorance. The parent was extremely irate and said, we've spent 24 classes or 36 classes or whatever, and my child has not learned. So I went back to him with an example of how head of Sony in Japan went to school for 19 years, never learned to play an instrument, but his fidelity to sound is what. So once we gave the parent that the child could go into, he's a fantastic sound engineer. This case study, these were the 2 case studies which got widely published in Chennai, and that's where we saw in the urban milieu of school. We had patrons who came up for every paying school. They gave us money to go to a government school or an aided school. I must say, as a subject, arts is so generous that qualitatively, the economics did not come into our curriculum. We had the same quality of singers, say from a Chennai public school to an to any school where the economics really did. So I agree with what Lynn said. It's the excellence comes. So 60% of the curriculum was baked, 40% was kept adaptive.
And how many schools were you?
Huge. So like I'll give you an instance. In Kinder music, there is this lovely rhythm which goes about a pudding 9 days old. Pudding in the pot, stirring the pot, 9 days old, and it was set to music on Mozart's K20 symphony, which has a relevance in Hindi music called Itna Na Mujhse Tu Pyar Bhada. It's a very catchy number, okay? Students and children loved it. We got a complaint from a board member. Said, our culture in India does not allow us to give a child old food. How are you talking about peas porridge in a pot 9 days old? Okay? So I went back to Kinder Music, which had crafted this curriculum, and Kinder Music came with a fantastic explanation. They said, the school has the option to remove it. However, this was done in wartime Ireland. So it was about how gas was less, and the mother would give the same food to the child, singing and stirring the pot with musical notes. The board was convinced, and they let the song stay in the curriculum. So that's been pretty much Artlink's journey. There are challenges, which I've given you the good side, but yeah, there are challenges which we'll come to.
Thank you for sharing that. And now I'm just going to bring the topic back to smart cities, art cities, because I feel it's important to look at the educational space in Bangalore with respect to the context of the smart city mission. So what does the concept of smart education entail? And I'm going to ask Meena that. And how are approaches and systems in Bangalore? I mean, if you can talk in general also, and looking at how technology, because I'm hearing about all this futuristic thing, but what is being done right now?
Right now from the city.
Leveraging technology specifically to Bangalore, that, there could be some best practices that could be learned, and then, other cities can kind of gain from it.
Well, I was part of the design capital application process where we were.
Congratulations on winning.
Well, we had to put that together because we were, like Geeta Narayanan was one of the spearheading person who got the designers involved and got the BBMP, the government, everybody involved, and we were trying to find what was the design aspects that we were putting in. But a lot of things were coming from citizen initiatives. This initiative of but the smart city aspect, which, there is the creative city there, but the smart city, there are a lot of discussions going on. The thing of data mapping, the data visualization, the data collection, which is happening around in the city. And I thought the whole process of writing the application, which it itself was like some 400-page application, itself was like putting together a city and where the things were not happening. And the best examples we could look at were how the lakes were coming back to action. And it was led by people who were from the IT industry, and they were using their own skills to bring together people and using the whole media and social media. And one of the things that I think, it's my own personal observation about this, is the use of the media itself. And the government, I don't know, they're talking about it, and they are much more conscious that one of the reasons why these kind of, in the application, they keep talking about what is your design district, what are your design initiatives, what are do you have a design manager, do you have a design administrator? So these kind of questions are coming to them. So I think there will be, like, it's just a beginning. And I don't know what, Sanjay will know better what are the rubrics that the city has filled in. But we at Srishti, we are trying to prepare people who can have that confidence to go out and work in these situations. We are working a lot with the BMRCL, which is the metro, working with looking at the metro stations as sites to do things. And one of the things was to invite artists, that I can talk a lot more, artists who work with data. So there were these artists from USA, they're called data print. And they wanted people to look at their own mobiles and see when you connect to the Google, what are the other things that you get. And it was like an open platform where people came in and it was like a performance. And you could actually see when you go into a site, how much of you, I mean, the whole thing was surveillance, liberty, freedom that they were looking at. So the Art in Transit is a big project that we've taken up with, and it's almost 10 years now we're working on.
I don't know, Sandhya had shared a very interesting fact yesterday about that you'll have the per capita largest number of activists, and how, you know, citizen journalism and citizens are actually making such a difference to the city, which I think is a very special point that we should look at. And just turning to corporate, governmental, and institutional support. I knew Nitragram was given the 10-acre plot to establish Business Village. The Science Gallery has also worked with the government of Karnataka to provide land and financial contribution. So if you could just kind of tell us how is it, the importance of governmental support for education institutes, and also collaborating with corporates, because in other institutions, in building this collaborative ecosystem.
Yeah. So I'll just take half a step back and say something about education. Now, having spent 20 odd years in the university before starting to work on the Science Gallery project, so I think there's an inherent tension in trying to talk about formalization of art education and employment, for example, right? I mean, it's with mass production that you start needing mass industrial workforce, and the arts themselves, when education in the arts started getting formalized, it was the industrial arts. So if you look at the JJ school, if you look at the Baroda school, etc. So in a sense, the formalization of art education is deeply tied in with the development of industry and the requirement for creative forces in the industrial world for mass production, right? And so the tension that we are constantly going to have to deal with whenever we talk about mainstreaming art education, or whenever we are going to talk about creativity and art education, is that where do we stand in relationship to this tension, right? And so I think there's no easy way to deal with it. I mean, in my own teaching, I think the one idea that not just myself but others that have followed is that you equip your students with the skills to, in a way, learn how to learn, and then you let them find their way through various things, right? The paths that they may create for themselves in the world. Now, coming back to working with the government and the corporate sector. So we are a Section 8 not-for-profit private limited company owned by the government. So it's a peculiar structure, and that's not peculiar in the sense not unique, but peculiar, where we are responsible to the government because of the funding, but at the same time, we are a private limited company, so we have those kinds of responsibilities. Plus, on our board, we have an equality of memberships, where board of directors, who are our governing body, has 3 academics, 3 independent board members drawn from the corporate world, and 3 government representatives. And so that kind of, in a way, establishes and maintains the balance. And my task, of course, is to make that happen. So to speak to the government aspect of it, I alluded to it when I spoke about the gallery, which is that I hugely appreciate the fact that the government of Karnataka stands behind this project. And I say this as a former academic, because it's very important for public institutions to have longevity, to bring about the kind of change in the perception of science, or to inform a better level of public debate on science. The institution is going to have to exist for 30, 40, 50 years before you see anything concrete happening. And in order for that to happen, you do need the government's investment in this as a public institution. And again, I mean, history has reasonable evidence for us to see that even when the corporate world contributes and helps establish public institutions, they've succeeded when the government has stepped in a very strong manner. So if you look at the most successful educational institutions in this country, they started out as philanthropic institutions, right? So if you look at the Indian Institute of Science, on the streets, it's still called the Tata Institute, for example, TIFR, National Physical Laboratory, National Chemical Laboratory, they've all, or the JJ School of Arts, right? So there is that element of so I think in today's parlance, there's a certain shallowness when we talk about, and I don't mean this judgmentally, but what I mean is that we don't think deeply enough about what public-private partnerships might substantially look like. And I think looking at these historical examples will help us understand far better in what ways in this particular culture, right? Because cultural manifestations are important for institutions to establish or not carry through certain trajectories. And therefore, I think we do need to look very carefully into the history of such partnerships, collaborations, support over the last 100, 150 years to understand what it would take in this country or in this city to establish institutions of this kind. And so I think I do see that the depth of these partnerships is important and ever more important going forward if we want public institutions and the mandate and a certain recognition for, now this might be an urban legend, but it's a useful urban legend where someone who otherwise is not very easily accepted in this country, Winston Churchill, who apparently owes some money to the Bangalore Club as well.
Checks in the mail.
Check. I doubt it. The guy's kind of, anyway. So apparently at sometime in the middle of the Second World War, much of the money was going for science effort. And there was a request to cut funding for the arts. And the answer was, and again, I mean, I don't stand by this, it might be an urban legend, but the answer was that then what are we fighting this war for, right? And I think that element of understanding that culture is important no matter what you do, and therefore a deep partnership between the government and the corporate world, but also others, is essential for this to
This could be a nice, easily replicable model which could be extrapolated across India.
I think so.
Yeah,
I do think so.
You wanted to add to this point?
Yeah, what Janvi was mentioning, I also firmly advocate that we need government and private partnership, because however bad it is to deal with the government, scale is something we can achieve. So I'm just quickly going to take 2 minutes to give an example. Is Supriti here? Okay, no. So I'm going to talk about the SPICMACAY. I'm sure most of us know about SPICMACAY. SPICMACAY is Society for Promotion of Indian Classical Music and Culture Amongst Youth. It's moved beyond music and all. It's gone into films, theatre. So SPICMACAY is a voluntary organization, recently completed 43 years. It's a voluntary society, completely funded through grants, but what they have done is tied up with all the states. All the states have a chapter, tied up with the Kendriya Vidyalayas. So Kendriya Vidyalayas are supposed to pay 7,000 rupees to us at SPICMACAY for a music experiential program every quarter. So I do add to what she's saying. I'm sure Ritu will also agree. The scale in terms, if the curriculum has to reach to entire India,
Right.
you need the government's buy-in, at least in education.
Ritu, you've been doing these AERs around the country, and could you just tell us about your efforts? And you've been white papering it, and what are the next steps? And you have one next month, I believe.
Yeah, so what we actually decided to do, the fact that I'm talking about school education and everyone here talks higher education, it's not really given that kind of relevance or importance, even amongst higher education institutions, okay? So just to kind of then see how do we again bring about that change and difference. We said it's important to involve the government in the process, but it's also important to go to every city and see what is the landscape there and what are the sentiments of the local people there regarding the arts. And this time we didn't just stay with visual arts, we also talked about the arts in general. So we included music, we included literature, we talked about design, we talked about film, theater. And so we went to 7 cities. We still have 2 more cities to go to, but we were in Chennai, in Kolkata, Baroda, Bhubaneswar, and we have Delhi, and we have one in Bombay end of September, and one in Guwahati. Now the whole emphasis here is to really look at how we've been marginalizing this whole concept of art education, but how do we involve the government bodies? Because any change or scale that you need to bring about, unless and until there's intervention of the government, we'll all be working in silos, and we'll all be individuals in our own islands, not being able to collaborate or take that knowledge forward. The other thing is that knowledge that exists is pre-existed knowledge. So it's not somebody's own domain. So I think that collaboration and sharing of that knowledge for us was very important. So when we talk to educators, practitioners, and also people who have businesses based on education, we've learned some very interesting insights into that, and which is what will culminate into an annual seminar in Delhi. And that's in collaboration with Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts. But at that forum is where we're inviting a lot of people to come and share their own views on art education. But not just that. It's not just about coming and sharing what you've done, but that whole engagement with the audience where everyone is given that platform to really think about some critical issues and come up with a solution. And post that, how do we create these local chapters in each of these cities with the government and local artists there to take that knowledge further into either districts or rural areas. So that's how we've kind of planned out the entire art education roundtables, which culminates into a seminar, along with creating. So for us, it's again, when we're talking our stakeholders, we're looking at a macro to micro level, where we start at the national level and we look at the government. The core of it is still the child. And that is what we celebrate. So in the whole process, it's also important to see not to leave behind anyone. So we're also engaging with educators and teachers. And we're creating interactive labs at our seminars for everyone to come and experience that, and then take that knowledge further. So for us, when we're talking smart cities, it's not just about an individual, but we look at it as a collective. We're looking at educators and teachers at school level, at children who actually, for us, a very critical part of our work is to how do you make your thinking visible? Because, I can't go and give you statistics to say, hey, I included this visual arts program and so there's 100% attendance, or your child has performed really well on your SAT scores. I can't do that, and there are lots of other variable factors that could have influenced it. But what we do is we curate the art show of our children, and their thinking becomes visible, which is what we're also taking into the seminar. So at each level, when you look at it, there is a lot of engagement and sharing of knowledge, and hopefully we'll be able to take that model further.
Thank you for that. And since the topic is these alternate and innovative models of arts education, and we've not talked much about festivals and biennales, and I want to turn to Lynn at the moment. And the NEA in the US gives about 6 million to folk art festivals across the nation. In India, we have the Jaipur Literature Festival, you have the Bangalore Literature Festival. There are, and I know Nityagram has an annual dance festival, and I can't pronounce it to save my skin, so I'm going to leave you to do it. But could you share just, the role and importance of these non-traditional forms of the biennales and the festivals, the non-formal ways of, sharing and learning?
Nrityagram had a festival called the Vasanta Habba. We haven't done it for many, many years, primarily because of the way it was structured, and times have changed and it couldn't function in its old format right now. She started Vasanta, it's called Vasanta Habba, and she started Vasanta Habba as a way to bring the greatest performers of India to rural Karnataka. The idea was to bring them to our village kids and villagers to be able to enjoy and have access to them. Vasanta Habba was structured like Nrityagram has pretty much been structured that way, where we don't follow any hard and fast rules about how a festival must be, or how you must speak about dance, or how you must... So Vasanta Habba had a very free-flowing, it was structured sort of like a Woodstock. It was easy. Anyone could come and enjoy dance and music. It didn't matter. It was all classical dance and music, but there were, young kids. The first time I came to Vasanta Habba was in '92, and I remember when I was sitting there, and there were these Pandit Bhimsen Joshi was singing, and there were all these young kids, several of them running back and forth from the stage and doing something to the stage. And afterwards I asked Pratima, I said, what's going on? What are these kids doing? And she said, these kids were going back and forth with little bits of paper with requests written on it. And it blew me away. I mean, I was just like, my God, these are like jean-clad kids, like I was in those days. So that's how Vasanta Habba started. So when people came to it, it was, it belonged to everyone. It belonged to you, it belonged to someone who was serious about music, it belonged to me who could come in my blue jeans and sit there and enjoy and have fun and go away and go back to the city and go to a discotheque and enjoy that just as much. And I think that's what made Vasanta Habba so, that's what made it grab the attention, especially of young people. Our average age group in Vasanta Habba was really in the people in the 20s, which is what we wanted for the classical arts. They were just not there.
I think we should work of bringing it back. Do we have time for questions or no? All right. Sorry, guys. I know I've been terrible at time management, but I have 5 of these rock stars sitting next to me, so what do I do? But thank you. Yeah, you all can talk at lunch, exactly. Thank you, panelists, for this exciting and discussion. I have so many more questions. I have actually a whole list I want answered, so I'm finding you during the lunchtime. But thank you, audience, for being here. We'll break for lunch right now, and we look forward to seeing you at the latter sessions, which are even more exciting. This is the most exciting. This is good. This is as good as it gets. I'm kidding. We have wonderful presentations lined up for you, so I'm looking forward to it. But feel free to talk to these wonderful panelists during the lunch break. Thank you very much.
Thank you.